Be kind and compassionate. Two concepts that, that have really escaped our world today. Even more so, I think, in the current political environment that we're in. Instead of talking about the issues, for example, the political candidates from the local level all the way up, they attack each other's personalities. They call each other, okay, they're calling each other names, and, they're like a bunch of schoolyard brats, the way they behave. But all they're doing is fueling division and fostering a culture of hostility rather than meaningful dialogue. You look at social media, and you'll probably notice the same things I've noticed. The vitriol that overflows from the campaigns to posts that go and comments that go between friends and classmates and neighbors and family members even. I've seen some posts this week that are generally unpolitical, yet by the time you get into the comments, it's turned into a political bashing of one side and the other as the comment feed gets longer and longer. We've lost sight of decency and kindness in our country today. We've lost our compassion. So, it's one of the things that I want us to think about today. We're continuing our series entitled Faith Beyond the Ballot Box. In a world of political division and uncertainty, there is one thing that remains, and that is our faith in Jesus Christ. And just as a recap, real quick, we began our study by remembering that no matter what happens on November 5th, no matter the election results, even in these times of political tension and division, we can rest assured that God's kingdom is eternal and unshakable. Jesus is Lord over all the earthly powers, and his kingdom will remain forever, and our true citizenship is in his kingdom, a kingdom not defined by political leaders, but by humility, servanthood, and our ultimate allegiance to God. We saw a couple of weeks ago how unity is not based on cultural, social, or political similarities, but rather on our shared identity in Jesus, which is that we are all sinners saved by an amazing grace. As believers, we're called to elevate Jesus above our differences, to work together as one body, reflecting God's love and bringing hope to a divided world. Last week, as a matter of recap, we saw that in a world where pride often drives division, especially during the election season, humility, the opposite of pride, is the key to fostering unity and healing. Jesus is our example, and we saw how humility dismantles pride and invites healing, not only in our relationships, but in our country as well. So today, in times of political division and tension, it's easy to become hardened toward those who have different views than us. But as followers of Christ, we're called to a higher standard, that is kindness and compassion. So this morning, we'll explore the power of kindness and compassion in healing divisions and bringing the light of Christ to a world in need. In a polarized world, kindness and compassion are not just virtues. They are essential to living out our faith beyond the ballot box. And a key part of this, a very important part of that, is how we use our words. Kindness reflects the heart of God this morning first. Two sheriff's deputies thought they were just responding to a routine call, and when they arrived, the situation was more than what they had initially thought. The call mentioned that it was a traffic issue, a traffic hazard in the middle of the road and in the form of a wheelchair. So when the deputies arrived, they were not surprised to see the wheelchair. That's what they found. But they also found an elderly woman stuck inside, sitting on the wheelchair. The battery in her electric wheelchair had died, leaving her stranded right in the middle of traffic. She wasn't able to walk or get out of it or do anything. She couldn't even finish crossing the road. Well, the deputies initially offered her a ride, but they had no way to deal with the wheelchair. It was too heavy to fit inside their cruiser, and the battery pack meant that folding it up was a non-starter. And so the only thing left to do that they could think of was to push her chair the mile-long journey back to her house, which that's exactly what Deputy Montanez did, while his partner, Deputy Chapman, followed closely behind in the patrol car. Well, you can see on the dash cam footage of the event that Deputy Chapman is heard teasing his partner, saying, "You can pick it up a little bit. You're only going like 1 mile an hour. Come on." But it was an issue of kindness, wasn't it? To stop and to help and to go beyond and above and beyond. Most I think of our emergency workers are that way. Kindness was extended in assisting a helpless elderly lady make it home. Kindness. If we cannot extend kindness and compassion to others, we're incapable of expressing God's heart for our neighbors, our friends, our family members, and our coworkers. Paul instructed the church to choose compassion and kindness, as this is the way of God. And so in Colossians chapter 3, Paul said this, starting at verse 12, therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourselves in compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Bear with one another, he says, and forgive whatever grievances you have against one another. Forgive as the Lord forgave you. And over all of these virtues, put on love, which binds them together in perfect unity. Kindness, compassion, humility, gentleness, and patience are all attributes that reflect the heart of God, who has shown us incredible kindness, grace, mercy, and compassion through his Son, Jesus Christ. Kindness is not just expressed through our actions, though. Kindness must be expressed in the words that we speak and the words that we write. Solomon said in Proverbs 18, the tongue has the power of life and death, and those who love it will eat its fruit. Our written words and our spoken words can either build others up or tear them down. Kindness is a deliberate choice that we must make to reflect the character of Christ and how we treat others, especially with our words. In a divisive political climate that like we're in today, the words we use carry power, and we must use them to bring life, not death. Contemporary Christian artist Toby Mac has often said, and I think it's really his logo now, to speak life. I challenge each of us to consider the words we choose. Pray that we will choose to speak life, not hatred, not anger, not condescension. People are looking to what we say. The world is watching us as the church. And so I pray that we'll clothe our conversations, especially in this political realm, with kindness and compassion. May our words truly reflect the heart of God and not the division in our world today. Second, today, I want to say that kindness is an act of compassionate service. There are many wonderful freedoms in our country today. In the Mariners Museum in Newport News, there's a special display for a rickety homemade aluminum kayak. This tiny makeshift boat seems quite out of place in the midst of the displays for very impressive naval vessels and artifacts from significant battles on the sea. But a bronze plaque tells museum visitors the story behind this kayak's heroic makers. In 1966, an auto mechanic named Laureano and his wife Consuelo decided they could no longer live in the oppression of Cuba's dictatorship regime. And so after spending months collecting scrap metal, they pieced together a boat just barely large enough for two small people. Well, then Laureano jerry-rigged a small lawnmower engine on the back of the kayak. And after months of planning and on a moonless night, they set out into the treacherous straits of Florida with only their swimsuits on. They had enough food and water for 2 days. Well, it took about 70 hours, though, for the U.S. Coast Guard to finally rescue the couple just south of the Florida Keys. Was it worth the risk? Well, Laureano said, when one has grown up in liberty, you realize how important it is to have freedom. We live in the enormous prison which is Cuba, he says, where one's life is not worth a crumb. Where one goes out into the street and does not know whether or not one will return because the political police can arrest you without any warning and put you in prison. He said, before this could happen to us, we thought that going into the ocean and risking death or being eaten by sharks, is 1,000,000 times better than to stay suffering under political oppression. They came to America seeking freedom. In our country today, we often take the freedoms that we have for granted. We fail to remember that just a few short miles off our southern coast of Florida, just a mile across our southern border along Mexico, lie countries that do not give their citizens the many freedoms that we have and enjoy in America today. But not only do we take these freedoms for granted, we take advantage of these freedoms, I think, at times, especially the freedom of speech. Just because we can say something doesn't mean that we should. In Jesus, we also have found freedom. Through his mercy and grace, we are set free from our sin, free to live a life of loving service. We also have to be cautious how we use that freedom. Paul writes in Galatians chapter 5, starting at verse 13, "You, my brothers, were called to be free. But do not use your freedom to indulge the sinful nature. Rather, serve one another in love." The entire law is summed up in a single command: love your neighbor as yourself. If you keep on biting and devouring each other, watch out, or you will be destroyed by each other. A lot of biting and a lot of devouring each other going on in our world today. Someone has once said the Bible tells us to love our neighbors. And it also says to love our enemies. Probably because they're generally the same people. Sometimes true. You know, in his book, Making Sense of God, Tim Keller notes that when the national anthem is sung at sporting events, the cheering begins on the line, "or the land of the free." The singer quite often, does a fancy, lengthy high note on those words. And Keller writes that even though the song goes on to talk about the brave, it sadly seems like an afterthought. Both the melody line and our culture highlight freedom as the main theme and the value of our society. But true love imposes limits on our obsession with freedom. There's a really great movie, if you haven't seen it, I can't remember exactly how old it is, but we watched it a while back, called Secondhand Lines. I don't know if you've seen that movie. A really, really good movie. It captures this idea of limits on our freedom, but that love places on it. And in a scene near the end of the movie, the boy that's kind of the star of the movie, he's fatherless and he has been abandoned by his mother to be raised by his two crazy great uncles. And so he tells one of the uncles, who is prone to depression and contemplated suicide, that he should not do that because he, the small boy, really needs him. And he tells him, he said, "You're my uncle. I need you to stick around and be my uncle." You see, the faithfulness of love will shape and constrain the freedom of love. Yes, we're free, but we got to be free to serve with love, not to abuse it. The freedom we enjoy in Jesus, Paul says, should be used to serve others. Kindness is an active way we can serve and we can love our neighbors, fulfilling the law of Christ. In James chapter 3, James uses the analogy of a rudder ship, the ship's rudder, to explain how even small things like the tongue can direct the course of our lives. And, he talks about that just a small rudder steers a large ship. And just like that, the words we speak steer the direction of our relationships and our influence in the way we serve others. He says it this way, starting at verse 4 of James chapter 3, "Take ships as an example. Although they are so large and are driven by strong winds, they are steered by a very small rudder, wherever the pilot wants to go. Likewise, the tongue is a small part of the body, but it makes great boasts. Consider what a great forest is set on fire by a small spark. The tongue is also a fire, a world of evil among the parts of the body. It corrupts the whole person, sets the whole course of his life on fire, and is itself set on fire by hell." Kindness is more than just being nice. It's a form of service, an act of compassionate love toward others. And it often starts with the words that we speak. Our words can either serve others or harm them. And in times of division, we must use them to build bridges. This morning, why don't we look for ways that we can serve others through kindness, both in deed and in word? What ways can we encourage someone instead of attacking them because of their differences of opinion? How can we lift up someone instead of tearing them down? May we demonstrate compassionate love, the compassionate love of God in tangible ways, using our words to heal rather than to divide. Well, finally, kindness brings healing to a divided world. In the parable of the Good Samaritan that we all know, that Jesus tells the story of a man who showed kindness and compassion to someone who was supposed to be his enemy. The Samaritan's kindness brought healing to the injured man, showing that kindness transcends boundaries of race and politics and culture. And so follow along as we read from Luke chapter 10. An expert of the law, starting at verse 25, an expert on the law stood up to test Jesus, saying, "Teacher, what must we do to get eternal life?" And Jesus said, "What is written in the law? What do you read there?" And the man answered, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and all your strength and also all your mind." And it also says, "Love your neighbor as you love yourself." Jesus said to him, "Your answer is right. Do this and you will live." But the man, wanting to show the importance of his question, he wanted to build himself up a little bit, said to Jesus, "Well, who is my neighbor?" And so Jesus tells the following story. As a man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho, some robbers attacked him. They tore off his clothes, they beat him, and left him lying there almost dead. It happened that a priest was going down that road, and when he saw the man, he walked by on the other side. Next, a Levite came there, and after he went over and looked at the man, he walked by on the other side of the road as well. Then a Samaritan traveling down the road came to where the man was hurt, and when he saw the man, he felt very sorry for him. The Samaritan went to him, poured olive oil and wine on his wounds, and bandaged them. Then he put the hurt man on his own donkey and took him to an inn where he cared for him. The next day the Samaritan brought out 2 coins, gave them to the innkeeper, and said, "Take care of this man. If you spend more money on him, I will pay back to you when I come again." Jesus asked, "Which of these 3 men do you think was a neighbor to the man who was attacked by the robbers?" And the expert of the law answered, "The one who showed him mercy." Jesus said, "Then go and do what he did." There's an article in the New York Times that cited some recent research published in the Journal of Experimental Psychology. And it shows how random acts of kindness have a greater impact than we often realize. And so the article tells the story that back in late August, Erin Alexander, a lady about 57 years old, was in the parking lot of the Target store in Fairfield, California. And she was just crying her eyes out. She was having a bad day. Her sister-in-law had recently died, and she was just really having a hard day that particular day. Well, a barista working at the Starbucks inside the Target store was also having a bad day. The espresso machine was broken down, and she was clearly stressed by all of the things that was going on around that. Well, Ms. Alexander pulled herself together for a few moments and decided to go inside and to get some caffeine to kind of help her through the day. And so she smiled when she saw that the espresso machine was down, and she ordered an iced green tea instead, and told the girl that was working there, "Well, hang in there." Well, after picking up her order, she noticed a message on the cup. The barista had scrawled next to a heart, "Aaron, your soul is golden." Ms. Alexander, who laughed and cried at the same time while recalling this story, said, "I'm not even sure I necessarily know what it means that your soul is golden. Well, no, I don't even know what that means." But she goes on to say that, the warmth of that small, unexpected gesture from a stranger who had no inkling of what was going on in her life moved her deeply. She said, "Of course, I was still really sad, but that little thing made the rest of my day." The point here is that kindness, no matter how small, can bring profound healing to others, just as the Good Samaritan's compassion did in Jesus' period. We're called to show kindness and compassion to others using both our actions and our words, especially those with whom we disagree. We often underestimate the power of simple acts of love and care. And in our divided world today, these moments of kindness can bridge divides and can offer hope. So this morning, let's consider how we can be like the Good Samaritan, showing kindness and compassion to people who may be different from us or see things differently than we do. What small, random acts of kindness can we do? Pay for a stranger's meal. Give someone a pat on the back. Send an encouraging text or email. Let someone who appears hurried in front of us in the checkout line. Hold the door for a family with small children. Maybe leave a bigger tip than normal. Offer your seat to an elderly man or woman. Or maybe simply just say thank you. How can we use our actions and words to bring healing and unity in our families, in our communities, and amid all of the political discussions that are going on in our world? It's just like the old song says. If you see your brother standing by the road with a heavy load from the seeds he sowed, if you see your sister falling by the way, just stop and say, you're going the wrong way. You've got to try a little kindness. Yes, show a little kindness. Let your light shine your light for everyone to see. If you try a little kindness, then you'll overlook the blindness of narrow-minded people on the narrow-minded streets. Recently an unnamed woman crashed her car when her tire blew out on I-75 in Gainesville, Florida. The police were soon dispatched to the scene, but when they arrived, they did not find her stranded all alone. In the dash cam footage, the screen is filled with an image of a 7-foot-tall Good Samaritan. Shaquille O'Neal happened to be right behind her when the accident occurred. And when he saw what had happened, the former NBA superstar didn't just simply call 911. He didn't outsource the rescue. He stopped as well and pulled over and involved himself personally in what was going on. Well, one of the kids from the car was actually outside the vehicle hanging out with the sports legend when the officers arrived. So Shaquille O'Neal, shared a fist bump with the deputy and then walked back to the car with the officers to tell the family goodbye. Art Forgy said said this comment to the reporters. He said the deputies had no idea when he was going to be there, but they both recognized him as soon as they got there. He happened to come upon the accident, so he stopped to see if any aid was needed. Once law enforcement arrived, he got in his vehicle quietly and he went on down the road. He didn't stand around for any accolades or for any praise for stopping to help. He was just being a good citizen. Good citizens. We're in need of some good citizens, both in our country and in God's kingdom today. We need good citizens these days to share kindness and compassion. Kindness reflects the heart of God, serves others in love, and brings healing to a divided world. Our words have the power of life and death. And in a world full of division and strife, kindness and compassion are essential for living out our faith beyond the ballot box. This morning, amid the divisions in our world, in the middle of the nasty comments thrown back and forth in the political arena, I pray we will commit to practicing kindness and compassion in both our words and in our deeds. I pray that we will look for opportunities to speak life, to serve others, and reflect the kindness of Christ in every interaction we have each and every day. When we choose kindness, life, and compassion, God will use these acts of love to heal the divisions and bring peace and unity into our broken world. Showing kindness and compassion is how we will maintain our faith beyond the ballot.